By popular request, we are taking a look today at the various ports of the classic 1987 light gun rail shooter that is Operation Wolf. Now, firstly, I have made this video a little bit different from the usual format that I use. There are a few different systems that had this game ported, but these systems are either slightly different or doesn't provide us with the full Operation Wolf experience. Notably, the panel on the right hand side of the screen is missing, and some versions also display this game in full screen format, whereas I found this a little bit difficult to fit these in with everything else in this video. After all, the point of these arcade port videos is to weed out the closest and most authentic to the original arcades game, and with these systems this was particularly problematic. I will rank these few different versions last, but firstly we'll go through the ports which attempted to look and play just like the arcade original game. I will also note here that the MSX had an aftermarket conversion, but like in all of my videos in this series, we are solely focusing on the original releases during these systems' commercial years. Although the Amstrad CPC 1988 conversion by Ocean is a really good effort for this game, I did find that it was just too fast. Now, I know that Linford Christie was iconic in the 1980s, but really, did he need to be in this game as a soldier you are controlling? Sadly, many games for the Amstrad CPC had a smaller gameplay screen, and this was one of them. It's not a massive issue because kids could wear glasses in 1988 too. Jokes aside, this is a decent enough port, but yeah, two main factors are its fast pace and smaller gameplay screen. Hit collision detection is actually spot on here by the seams bit, although I did find controlling the crosshair did appear to be a little bit stiff with this port occasionally. All in all, definitely not particularly a really bad awful port, but a damn sight better than yesterday's Wonder Boy Amstrad's conversion. Most people likely would have been very satisfied with this game back in the day. You know, when I come across ZX Spectrum arcade ports which play so amazingly, a little smile crops up on my face, knowing that higher spec hardware was around at this point of release that did a much poorer job of much better hardware too. If you can tolerate the monochrome colours, Operation Wolf on the spec key is awesome in comparison with the Amstrad version. There was absolutely no controller issues with this version, and to note, I was actually using the Sinclair joystick for this and not a Kempston for a change. Collision detection was pretty smack on with this too. Its scrolling was just about right too and didn't feel too fast. This was the 128K version I was playing here. 1988 was a decent year for Spectrum users. The Commodore 64 version is actually fairly good. At this point, I cannot actually believe that Ocean Software produced 3 of the main 8-bit computers, which were actually decent. The game opens up with its authentic arcade opening, where the screen scrolls before the gameplay actually starts. Now, my only beef really with this version is the crosshair. As you will see in the gameplay footage, the crosshair is nice and visible until you start shooting. You will then easily lose where you are when you're trying to aim or aim at a soldier, and it disappears once you start shooting, and it's just not easy to judge. Nice colours used, not overly bright but kind of dull, but let's be fair, it is a war zone, so it's not likely going to be all sparkling. Scrolling is spot on here with no slowdowns, and collision detection appears to be fairly good here too. Sprites are a little chunky, but that's the Commodore 64 for you. Overall, a fairly decent 8-bit home computer port. The issue with the Atari ST port of Operation Wolf is its slow frame rates. I mentioned earlier that some ZX Spectrum games can perform better than higher end systems, and this is a good example of that. Animations, backgrounds look great and the sound is excellent too, but it's just not much fun to play due to the extreme pacing of this version. There is much better to come, but let's just stay focused here that the sprites in the Atari ST version are almost spot on with the arcade original, and of course a lot bigger than those micro 8-bit versions. The IBM PC compatible DOS port is very good. It is a slightly on the choppy side when sprites are moving, but definitely not as bad as some other DOS conversions that I have covered on these port videos so far. And of course this is much more superior in terms of performance compared with the Atari ST version. The scrolling screen isn't an issue, the crosshair is also fairly tidy here with nice hit detection collision. A more dull colour approach has been used with this port. Taito released this back in 1989 and it really isn't that bad at all. Definitely up there as one of the best DOS arcade conversions. It even has the intro where a soldier parachutes downwards and also shows us the operation map before the game starts. So in first place for the most convincing and most authentic looking port of Operation Wolf, I'm choosing the Commodore Amiga. I think that the Commodore Amiga Ocean conversion firstly would have worn the hell out of a lot of tank mouses with this release back in the day. It is almost similar to the DOS conversion, but of course plays so much nicer and looks slightly better too. And of course the music sounds much more authentic to the arcades game. And that is what you get for being a Commodore fan back in the day. Mainly awesomeness, that is. This is a fairly hard port, very difficult that is. I found myself dying a ridiculous amount of times with this version. Again, we are going for that more dull look with the colour palette here. It plays really nicely and scrolls nicely too. Granted, sprites on screen do have a slight bit of lag when they're moving around, but definitely not as bad as the DOS version. This is totally playable and I would have loved this version back in the day. So that's it for the most authentic looking port. So next section of this is going to be moving on to those last remaining versions of this game which weren't too great, but we're going to rank those anyways. Let's be honest, did this Nintendo NES 1989 port by Taito really deserve to go any higher? There was just way too much playing field and not enough really happening in terms of killing soldiers and blowing up tanks. It is fairly ugly too for a Nintendo NES game. The gameplay is pretty dull, and to be honest, as a kid back then, I think I would prefer to play Duck Hunt. I think by taking away the panel on the right hand side, which displays the ammo and the grenades you've got, this version kind of gives far too much playing area, which is pointless when it's not being utilised. Very similar to the NES conversion, although this is an improvement in terms of the colour palette used and the sound. The colours with the Sega Master System are of course much darker, and I think that it looks that much better for doing this too. In terms of sound, the NES version just sounded utterly pitiful. Example, when shooting at a helicopter in the NES version, it kind of sounded very strange. Whereas here in the Sega Master System conversion, in terms of 8-bit sound production, it actually sounds that much better. Controller wise, this is pretty good, although with all these ports I have not been using a light gun. One issue with the Sega Master System version is of course, just like other versions in this section of the video, it is totally removing the whole look of Operation Wolf with the side panel or right hand screen removed. We do have it at the bottom, but still just doesn't look quite right. We'll also comment here that sprites or tiles do flicker a fair amount here in this Master System version. Although the format of the PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16 conversion changes from every version in terms of scoring right rather than left in Mission 1, and this port also denies that side panel from being on the right hand side, this is a much tidier and cleaner version in terms of how it looks. Something very strange with this port is that the stage menu before the game begins generally has 6 stages on display, whereas here we only have 4. A nice feature of this game though is that we actually have the ability to change the speed of how fast the game plays. Like I say, this version scrolls to the right, and although the gameplay looks familiar, the layout is very different from the others in terms of the army barracks and watchtower placements, and even enemies who are shooting at you. They've actually added an addition of a soldier in here with a bulletproof armor who will literally take a grenade to kill off. Overly, not a bad port, but just like others in this section of the video, it is very different. I personally see the FM Towns port as an upgrade from the PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16 conversion. Again, this version scrolls right and also displays just a few missions. A strange and very noticeable addition to this game is randomly we see a young lady ducking for cover whilst only dressed in red underwear. So I'm not quite sure what that was about, but let's just say it's a Rambo thing, just like Operation Wolf is pretty much based around that type of genre film. The quality over the PC Engine version is obviously much more improved here and generally better in terms of its sound production and gameplay. One feature that does to some degree remain faithful to the source material is the ammo panel actually being displayed on the right hand side here. Okay, so not much like the arcade version, but at least the developers attempted to keep this in mind and keep it to some extent faithful to the arcade original game. And that's it for today's ranking of various different ports of Operation Wolf. So like I said at the start of the video, this is a very unusual way for me to rank these videos, but given the differences of the last section of this video, I hope that you can understand why I did it round this way. But anyways, let us know in the comments which your favourite port of Operation Wolf was on your home computer or home console, and did you actually play this in the arcade? I personally remember seeing this in the arcades, but I was too young and little at the time to actually reach up to grab those machine guns mounted onto the arcade machine. But anyways, thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.